My name is Mette Bach, and my story is called The Conversation, and it's in Visible, a femethology. When most people move, they give notice to their landlords in the form of a phone call, or possibly a letter. My landlord doesn't operate that way. For one thing, he asked my partner and I to stay forever, and he said that he would never raise the rent. He's about 75, and while his English is rusty, I'm told his Cantonese is even harder to understand. After my partner and I broke up, I stayed for nearly half a year, in part so that I wouldn't have to disappoint him. When I finally decided to give notice, I budgeted an afternoon and drove to his house, where he insisted that I drink cola and eat unfolded fortune cookies with him. He ushered me into his office, which is also his bedroom, and which is about the size of a walk-in closet. I sat on his bed, and he took the wheelie office chair and put on his reading glasses. We spent the first hour talking about the parking ticket that he got last week and how difficult it would be for him to show up to pay the fine in person. He could send a check in the mail, but how would he know if they got it? Who could trust mailmen these days? City Hall had cancelled the telephone payment option, and so he would either have to go in person or pay online. That's when he gestured for us to switch seats, such that I was in front of his 386 PC. His kids were too busy to give him a tutorial on the internet, he said, and so the duty fell to me. I figured out his dial-up connection. He reconciled his reluctance to send his credit card numbers into cyberspace. The lesson was over before my cola was even warm. A little more small talk about his cab driving days and his mahjong friends, and I knew I had to execute. I was blunt. I said, "We broke up, and she's already moved, and now I have to too." We sat in silence for a while, Mr. G not being the type of person who feels the need to speak in order to alleviate awkward, quiet moments. "I'll miss you," he said. "I'll miss you too, Mr. G." We switched seats again. He poured more cola despite my objection. He pushed his chair back from the computer desk and looked at me, inquisitive. "This woman thing, is this something that you usually do?" I understood his confusion. My ex is not much of a lady. She can use the women's washroom, but she often has an easier time in the men's. We had lived together in his house for the past 2 years and spent many evenings with him, drinking cheap wine and listening to his stories about coming to Vancouver with nothing when he was only 16, and how he had been a houseboy and had driven a taxi, and how he had bought real estate and put 5 kids through university. He told us all about his failed marriages, his affinity for gambling, and his good-for-nothing daughter who didn't understand hard work. Invariably, by the end of these encounters, he'd tell me that I was beautiful, like a movie star. And then he'd pat my ex on the back and tell her he'd never known a woman so good at fixing things. Yes, Mr. G, the woman thing is something that I do. He told me it was okay. He said when he was young, it wasn't okay to be woman or man. But things were different now, and better. He hesitated for a moment, and then started rifling through his files. Usually when I visit him, he pulls out the family album and tells me stories about his younger days. He shows me his kids and talks about the importance of family and sticking together. I had a feeling that that was what I had coming. I know that Mr. G doesn't approve of the bachelor apartment lifestyle. I was pretty sure he was going to suggest that I move back in with my parents. Instead, he pulled out a photo of his dentist son, the one he's always boasting about. He was in a cap and gown on graduation day, looking like he was posing for the kind of photo that he knew his parents would show to everyone. He too apparently lives alone in a small condo in the West End and doesn't aspire to the kind of family life that Mr. G wants for him. "My son," he paused. "I think maybe he's man. He's a dentist, very handsome." "Oh?" He's very smart, Mr. G insisted. Maybe you should try. And that was when I realized that I was being set up, and I couldn't help but laugh. I have tried, Mr. G. I'll bet your son has tried too. You're beautiful, he said. You could have a very rich husband. And then he told me that I was a good girl for choosing my ex, who, even though she wasn't a rich man, had skills and talent and was smart. She had put in a new floor and installed our gas stove and rewired the house for him. Mr. G and I were both impressed with her abilities. I loved her, I told him. I loved my ex-wife too, he said, and now she has my houses. But it's okay. Women, you can't keep them. They stay until they don't want to no more, and then they go, and it's okay. Mr. G has always made me feel that way, that things would be okay. We drank our colas in silence and then chatted about the pain of parking tickets. He insisted that I take his son's business card anyway, just in case, and said that no matter what, I should at least get 20% off any dental work I needed. As I left his house, I realized that even though he never fixed the plumbing or the rotting planks in our porch, he was the best landlord that I ever had. My name is Mette Bach, and I'm going to read my story, The Conversation, in...
Take two.